What do you want, Charlie? You want to make a house?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go make a house. Let's go.
Let's
go make a house. Let's go make a house. Oh, okay. Let's go make a house. Let's go make a house. Okay, what kind of house do you want to make, Charlie? You want me to get to your stuff? Oh, you want to make this one? Okay, we can make a house. What up, YouTube? Thursday morning, 10:30, in the midst of uploading today's vlog. Got on the Sacramento Kings Jason Williams old school jersey. Oh yeah. Got this jersey maybe like 15 years ago. Maybe longer, maybe even longer actually. I'm about to head to the casino, get in another session. I'm thinking possibly instead of playing tomorrow, sleeping tomorrow during the day, and instead trying to squeeze in a PLO session tonight. We'll see if I can get that done. I think it's going to be a little unlikely because I've just been so tired come like 9-10 p.m. that's like thinking about even going back to the casino sounds awful. But I'd love to be able to squeeze in a PLO session for this. So anyway, let's go! Another beautiful day here in San Francisco. Today is a bit sunnier. I love it here. I grew up in New York, in Elmont, it's right on the border of Queens, beginning Long Island. Didn't spend too much time in Manhattan growing up. Back then, it wasn't as nice as it is now. I'm sure New York City's great. I went to school in Boston. I loved Boston. Then I moved to Vegas for a couple of years. Had a great time there. But I think of all the places I've ever lived, San Francisco's got to be my favorite. I think mostly just because of the temperate weather. The people are really nice. A number of things. Culture. There's a lot of fun things to do. Short trips if you want to go to Tahoe. Snowboarding, skiing. You've got the mountains, the forests up north, the wineries. There's just a lot of cool things to do. Short driving distances from here. So I love living in the city. I wanted to go over one thing that I didn't really kind of get to hash out fully yesterday in yesterday's video regarding the hand where I flop top set of 10s because Charlie was getting antsy and needed to get home. But just to kind of fully flush out that idea, and for those who didn't see the episode, essentially I call raise at 25 with pocket 10s on the button. The small blind playing 1,000 makes it 105, 80 more to me. I call in position, A, to flop a set, and B, sometimes I think I'm going to just have the best hand here. Playing in position, I'm going to be able to navigate well against this specific opponent, I believe. Flop goes 10-9 deuce or 10-9-3 with two spades, and he overbets the pot. And so the point that I wanted to go over here was, this is a mistake I think a lot of recreational players make, where when they have big hands, they just want to protect their big hands, they get scared, they don't know what to do, and so their idea is like, I'm going to bet big, I'm going to find out where I'm at, or B, I'm going to, make sure that this guy doesn't get lucky on me. And they've got it all wrong. It's just completely opposite. A, when you have a big hand, you want to get value from your hands. When you're overbetting hands, people know exactly what you have. So the only way they're going to continue is if, they have a hand that either has great equity against one pair, or they themselves have you beat. So the idea that you want to lock people out is just completely opposite. A lot of these players I see regularly complaining, I run so bad, I always lose with aces, and they don't realize that's because A, they're either playing them very, very poorly, they're just never getting value from other people when they actually have them beat, right? They're overplaying it, and then when they finally do get called, they're only getting called because they're beat. So really, you don't want to be playing scared. It's actually counterintuitive, because by playing scared and by bombing, you're just not playing correctly. You're not getting value from your good hands. You're looking to get called by one pair, by overpairs, because these are the hands that you're going to have dominated and crushed. So the important thing is to stop playing scared, learn how to play post-flop. In this hand where he bets 275 into, what was it, like 230 or something like that, what he should be doing is betting like half pot, maybe even less, to induce. If he's going to go broke anyway, he wants to ensure that I'm going to be continuing with worse. Final point again here is just stop playing scared. Learn to play post flop. Be okay with these situations where you have one pair. You know, it's all right to bet half pot, and then if you get raised, to go from there. You have to understand, you know, when you have an overpair, you can generally feel comfortable in live poker. If somebody just starts putting in some big bets, you're gonna know where you're at. Like, you have to get comfortable in these situations. Anyway, that's all. You see that? Another pro tip. Park near the security cameras at a casino if you can. You never know when someone's going to hit you or something like that. At least it'll be on camera. I've actually known some people who've had angry people key up their cars. Also can be caught on camera. Or maybe it prevents people from keying up your car if they know that they're on camera. So yeah, park near cameras if you can. Welcome to your daily dose of hand histories from Charles's car while he drives to go pick up his son from daycare. Yeah, that's a mouthful. Maybe I should shorten that. What do you think? Now let's get to my favorite hand of the session. Straddle pot. We've been straddling a fair amount in this game, so 3-5-10. Probably half the game played about as a 3-5-10 game. The whole field almost limps to me on the button. I think it's like 4 limpers, 3 or 4 limpers to me on the button. I have 8-7 offsuit. I limp the button. Small blind limps. Now the big blind makes it 60. I think the straddler, who's the action player, he calls. One of the limpers calls. Another limper calls. Believe we end up going 6 ways to the flop. Anyway, so it goes calls to me. I'm never folding here. I'm in position. I'm on the button. 50 more. We're all deep. We're going to play some poker. So I call 50 more. The flop comes Jack 8-4 with 2 hearts. Small blind checks. The pre-flop opener, the pre-flop opener, he checks, and it checks to me. And when it checks to me here, I just sense like a ton of weakness. I'd kind of been paying attention to everybody except the board. Once I look at the board and see what the board is, I think once the pre-flop opener checks that a jack would have bet this flop, unless there's maybe some hand like Jack 9, Jack 10, maybe some Queen Jacks who don't really want to be bet and raised, and so they're trying to like pot control. But nonetheless, once it checks to me, I don't think anybody has a jack. I don't think that the pre-flop opener has an overpair. Although if he could have an overpair and just be trying to pot control himself because he doesn't want to lead here, get raised, and essentially just have to kind of fold because like if he gets raised on this wet board, I guess he could try to stack off and hope someone's got some big draw, but I think it ends up putting him in a really bad spot. So anyway, I tang and end up betting 140. I think this is like more than enough. I don't need to be betting huge to take this pot. I'm gonna put just a lot of people in bad spots continuing here. For example, the pre-flop opener, if he calls, how's he going to continue here if he does have an overpair? I'm going to put him in just a world of hurt on, a myriad of runouts that doesn't either make him a set or end up coming like deuce with no heart. Anyway, he ends up being the only caller. So he calls 140 and it folds and everybody else folds. So I'm feeling pretty good about the situation because I think that I've essentially pegged his hand just being one pair, possibly queens, kings, aces. I think he's always betting a jack. Maybe he's got like 10s or 9s. That's a possibility. Obviously, we're kind of praying to make 2 pair of trips here so that we can go to Value Town. The turn is the oh-so-gorgeous offsuit 7. I make 2 pair. It's nice here that I bet the flop, obviously, because in a multi-way pot now, let's say that I check the button and now we get to the turn, I think that I'm going to be really afraid of someone having 9-10. Now that I've bet the flop and kind of thinned the field just to him and I'm gonna know that he never has 9-10. So that's kind of one of the advantages of betting here with the 8. It's obviously protecting my equity with the pair as well as thinning the field for the draws. So now that we end up going heads up to this turn, I know what I'm up against. So he checks and I end up betting 330 for value. He's playing about 850. So I'm looking for him either to check jam what could be his overpairs that are just kind of never folding, or maybe if somehow he ends up like getting cagey with like ace king of hearts or something like that, which I assume is just always check raising the flop, raise queen of hearts. He kind of goes in the tank for a bit. He ends up calling, and we're kind of hoping for kind of a nice brick, something that either A doesn't complete the flush or B pair the board and counterfeit me. The river is an offsuit queen, and he checks. He leaves himself at like 520. I go into the tank, and I think about whether I can go for value here. I think it's kind of a slam dunk. I'm slightly afraid that he might have like just done something really goofy with pocket jacks or pocket queens. But at the end of the day, scared money don't make no money. I think it's very likely that I have the best hand here, and I expect him to just never ever fold if he does end up having queens plus. At this point, once he arrives to this river that isn't a flush completing card, he kind of just can't fold. So I eventually rip it for 520. He goes in the tank, isn't too happy, feels like he wants to call, ends up saying, he's like, man, I really feel like I have the best hand, and ends up folding. After the hand, he ends up saying that he has pocket nines. So he called the turn because he turned double gutted, which makes a bit sense. Kind of the whole hand makes sense. He had flopped the underpair to the jack. When I kind of underbet this flop, he calls thinking he could still have the best hand. Everybody folds. On the turn, he picks up double gutter, so even if he thinks he doesn't have the best hand, he has outs. And by the river, I guess he just essentially thinks I wouldn't go 3 streets here as a bluff. I believe that if he's getting to this river, he should probably be calling off against me, because I was planning on playing my pair of eights this way, essentially on almost all runouts. I was obviously using the hearts to bluff, and like I said, barring some like offsuit 3, offsuit deuce run out, I was essentially going to be going 3 streets as a bluff here against him, who I think has a capped range. So I think that kind of goes to show you how it would have worked, really, because most of the hands that he's up against, which I think are going to be flush draws, he ends up folding with the nines. Obviously, the nines is a pretty tricky spot on the river, but at the same time, I'm not betting a jack here, so I either have a set or I have like 9-10 specifically for a straight. Possibly like a queen-eye flush draw that river's a queen, but I think if I'm him, I just end up calling here because I'm going to be bluffing too much with some random hand. This is one of the last few hands, if not the very last hand that I actually played during my session. I obviously played, I think, about another orbit, but after this hand, I had already kind of decided I was going to be leaving shortly. So I pick up ace-queen of spades after an old man had limped. He'd been doing a lot of limp folding to me. He had also like raise folded a lot versus me. I'd picked up like aces and some other big pairs a couple times, and I like 3-bet him and he folded. So I end up making it 40. Here we go, heads up to a flop, which comes 7-4 deuce with 2 diamonds. He checks, and I c-bet, I think like $35 or something like that, and I now down bet. He calls. The turn is like the 8 of diamonds, so the flush gets there. He checks. He'd been just so passive against me previously that I just felt like I was going to go multi-streets and just keep barreling off here. And so my plan was kind of just to fire one more bullet. It didn't have to be big in my mind to get him to fold what I thought were just some like weak pairs. Obviously, also, if he has like a flush draw and had gotten there, I think he's going to end up check raising me in this spot. So I bet 65. And he calls fairly quickly. I'm kind of done with the hand at this point. I've also got some tells that I thought he was possibly like kind of strong once he makes his turn call. The river is the 4th diamond, and so now he checks. Once he checks in this spot, I kind of feel like I've got the green light to try to bluff him off of his hand. Again, what I'm mostly targeting are like weak made hands, like 1 pair, like a 7 that would like flop, like ace 7 maybe. Just some hands that I think he's going to fold a lot here on the river. Just hands mostly that don't have a diamond, or even those that have a diamond that can't continue. Most importantly, if he possibly called me on the turn with some like 10-eye flush, this is a really bad river for his hand. So he checks. I bet 160, and he pretty much snap calls me with 2 10s with the 10 of diamonds, making like a 10-eye flush on the river. I think pretty unfortunate for me. So I ended up bluffing off in that hand like $250, something like that. Obviously the last 160 I really don't need to. And then I had a couple of other hands where I like raised ace king or raised ace jack. I folded the ace jack to a 3-bet. The ace king I whiffed in a multi-way pot. So I ended up losing maybe like 300, 350 from my peak. At the peak I was probably up around like 1700. Anyway, either way, it was a great session. Ran well. I think I played fairly well. Obviously got lucky in a couple of spots. We ended up winning 1,358. So another great day, 4 days in a row. Today's Thursday. Gonna put in one more session tomorrow before my wife and I have dinner plans with one of our old coworkers and his wife. So it should be a lot of fun. I'm actually contemplating going to play PLO tonight, depending on if my wife comes home early enough and can watch Charlie. And so we'll see if we can squeeze that. And obviously if I do that, then that'll probably be its own episode. And I'm just not going to play tomorrow during the day because I'm most likely just going to be wrecked. It's 10:40 at night. I'm in my car, headed back to the casino for some PLO. That's right. I actually have like 2 hands that I didn't get to detail on the trip back to picking up Charlie today on Thursday afternoon. And so I needed to complete those. I figure since I've got to complete them, can't really do that at home. Otherwise it'd be too loud. My wife's watching television. No place really to do that in our 1-bedroom apartment since Charlie is asleep. Figured might as well head to the casino, get to editing, do these 2 hands, and then the PLO, assuming I do get into the PLO game and play a fair amount of it and have some interesting spots, that could possibly be the topic of Friday's vlog. So let's get into these 2 hands. It might be a little bit confusing because it's going to be out of order as I did do the final hand during that drive. So we're going to be doing a little flip-flopping back and forth. That's okay. Never stopped us before. In this hand, this is actually like one of the hands in the middle of the session. The action player opens to 20, small blind calls. I'm in the big blind with 4-5 of hearts. Obviously always calling here against the action player. No need to be 3-betting. I'm just going to take this pot kind of out of position and hope to make a big hand against him. The flop goes 9-4 deuce with 2 diamonds. Small blind checks, I check, and the action player checks behind. When he checks behind, I expect to have the best hand here, kind of almost always, or at least against him. I expect him to be betting pocket 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s here a lot. And obviously if he flops a 9, I expect him to bet as well. The turn is an offsuit jack. Now the small blind kind of goes into the tank for a bit and ends up betting $40 here. I don't think that he necessarily always has to have a jack here to be betting. There are now on the turn 2 draws. It's clubs and diamonds. So I think he could be betting any of the draws. Similarly, I obviously think that my 4 and 5 are always live here. So even if I am behind to his jack, I can hit a 4 or a 5 to suck out and put in a nice big bet on the river to get value from his jack in case he does have that. And considering that there are all these draws, if he does check to me on the river, I'm going to be able to take control of the pot. So I call, and to my surprise, the action player overcalls. The river is a 10 of diamonds, and the small blind checks. Once he checks, I think it's fairly obvious that he does not have the flush. I think that considering that he bet the turn, he's going to be betting this river always once he makes the flush. And so I think now that his cap is his range is capped. Looking at the action player, considering the front door flush draw got there, I would expect him to always bet flush draws on this flop in position. So I think we can eliminate flush draws from his range. So the point here is I don't expect to win on this river pretty much ever. I expect that either one of them turn like a straight draw and has now river to 10, or just had a jack. So I expect to lose here a fair amount of the time. And so thinking about these players' capped ranges, I think this is a great spot to be leading into them. I end up betting 140, and they both pretty much snap fold. I think this is kind of not a very large pot, but this kind of elucidates the point of taking advantage of players' capped ranges and attacking that. I think this is kind of the key to poker. I had a hand that I didn't really describe, but I can kind of go into quick detail here early on in this session where I had pocket jacks. I opened pre-flop, got 2 callers. Flop came 10, 10, 7. I led, got like 3x on the flop. Don't really love it. I'm out of position. I call, turns an ace, I check, and now he bombs it. And I kind of thought about heroing him here. He can be kind of a spaz at times, but at the same time, I just don't have enough information here to be trying to hero down. And so the point here being, why put yourself in these tough spots out of position trying to figure out if like pocket jacks are going to be good on this board? Live players just don't bluff often enough. And so really, instead of trying to make these calls in spots where you just don't have enough information, forget those. Take the hands where either A, you're going to have value most of the time and take people to value town, and similarly attack people when their ranges are capped and you can now just bluff their pants off. Oh yeah. So continuing that same thought process from that last hand, we have this hand. I have Jack 10 offsuit in like early mid position. This is a spot I should just be folding always, but the game was playing kind of tight, and I just decided to open it. I opened the 15. The player immediately to my left makes it 45. Now the player to his immediate left thinks for a bit and ends up calling, folds back to me. I think this is a fine spot to just fold. That being said, it's only $30 more than me. I think I can navigate post-flop perfectly fine, especially against these two opponents. I decided to just take one off here. Again, I think this is a spot that's just best as a fold. This hand isn't going to play that well out of position. If I do end up making some big hand, it's like, it's never earth-shattering when you make a big hand with Jack 10. People always think like, oh yeah, Jack 10's obvious. Like if this flop comes 7, 8, 9, it's not like all of a sudden pocket queens are going to give me all their money. So I call. Flop comes 10, 7, 3 with 2 spades. I check. The pre-flop 3-better bets 50, which is really small here. The player after him calls, and now it's on me. I don't think I'm ever folding here. At the time, I thought it was just kind of a clear just call. After having kind of thought about it and reanalyzed the situation, I think this is a great spot to be check raising. I flop top pair and block top set. Given his small bet sizing, it's just really weird. It looks like he can just have like an airball like ace king high. Also, because he's got the player to act behind him, I think he has to be afraid of what's going to happen if I check raise. So I think check raising here is perfectly fine. I can make it like 200. I'm going to put him in a bad spot. His most likely hand is going to be 1 pair on this board, and so I can kind of continue from there, just barreling. Let's say now he folds. The player behind him is going to be kind of in the similar spot. Once I check raise with the field here, he's got to be scared, unless he flops a set himself, like a set of 7s. At the time, I kind of just didn't love the situation because the 3-better bets small. It was kind of wonky, and now the player after him calls. I was rather afraid that one of them could be slow playing some really big hand, and I just didn't want to get out of line. I think that's a big mistake. I shouldn't be playing scared, and I think the best play here is to just be check raising. I just call, turns a 7, I check, and now the guy who 3-bet me pre-flop bets 100. Again, a really small bet in this spot. The player behind him calls, and once he calls, I'm just kind of done with the hand. I don't think I have the best hand here very often 3 ways, and kind of similarly, if I did have like 10s full, I don't really know exactly how I'd be playing it here. I'd probably be raising because I want to build a pot. There is extra money in the hand. I don't want to just call and have the river like check through. Maybe I guess I can lead rivers into the field, but that just looks really strong. So I'd probably be check raising small and then bombing river. And given what I have, I just don't really want to be getting out of line here in this spot, like making it 250 and then having to like rip the river and just pray that like they both fold. So I end up folding. The river is an ace, which is really interesting. And now again, that pre-flop 3-better bets 100. And this kind of goes into this similar boat of capped ranges. So he bets 100. The player to his left looks over at his stack, thinks for a bit, and puts them all in for like 500. He has 400 more. The 3-better pre-flop goes in the tank, ends up folding, and the other player, when he mucks, he kind of does this weird muck where it looks like he wanted to show his cards, but they kind of like flop over. The player to my left ends up being like, wait, what was that? And so he says to him, he's like, yeah, I was pocket 9s. I just didn't think there was any way I could win other than that. And I thought I saw like an 8 or a 9, so I think this is quite likely to be true. He's not really a guy to be lying in this spot, so I think that just makes a ton of sense. He has pocket 9s, thinks that on this small bet on the flop that he's got the best hand. Again, small bet on the turn, thinks he can have the best hand, so he's going to call. And then by the river, when the player bets 100 into him, it's just fairly obvious that what went from looking like ace high is no longer ace high, and it's probably a hand like jacks that is scared of the ace and scared of this board and doesn't really know what to do. And so this is a really big mistake to be blocker betting here against any opponent who's even relatively decent, because they're going to realize that you have a capped range, you don't have like a very good hand, and probably won't be calling a raise. I think a lot of times, there are like bad players who will bet this 100 and still call off like jacks or queens because they just don't care and are just never folding. But the problem is if you're not prepared to make this hero call, don't be making this goofy $100 bet on the river. Either be betting larger or just don't bet at all, because like I said, better opponents are going to exploit you, and that's, I think, exactly what happened in this situation. My most likely read of what he had was probably pocket jack, maybe pocket queen. I mean, I actually can't even really figure out what the hell this guy had to be betting the way he did. Maybe he had pocket 8s, maybe pocket 9s were the best hand. I don't really have any idea. But again, the idea here was to elucidate the point of attacking capped ranges and exploiting your opponents. based on their bet sizes. And I think the player with the pocket nines did exactly just that here. So we are on our way. Good luck to us. Been running hot this week. Hopefully that continues into PLO. Let's go.